I look at running for office for me as completely not in the cards for the lifestyle reasons, for the impact on my family. In some sense, of course, like everybody, you feel a little bit guilty because you're like, well, if I could help, why wouldn't I? But then you just got to get over that and just go live your life.
Hey, I'm Armando Leduc, producer, film actor, and owner of Leduc Entertainment. I've chosen a life off the beaten path and wanted to find others that are doing the same. Spaghetti on the Wall is a show based on all of the years that I've thrown spaghetti on the wall and nurtured what stuck. We will share fun stories, ideas, tips, tricks, and more. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall.
What up, what up, what up? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you're consuming this podcast. Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with another banger. Parker Smith, attorney, myth, the man, the legend. How are you?
Doing wonderful.
Good.
As in most days, I have a 7-month-old at home, so every day is it's a new adventure, and I love it.
Is this your first kid?
It is, yes.
Yeah, I have one. She's 3.5 now, but yeah, 7 months. That's tough. The not sleeping. Does she sleep or he?
So it's a he, and I would say he sleeps pretty well.
That's great.
Fortunately, my wife and I have kind of opposite schedules when it comes to sleeping. I'm kind of a freak and wake up crazy early in the morning, so I naturally just take over at that time, and so we both get full amounts of sleep. And
Hallelujah. That's awesome. What time? What time do you wake up?
So my typical is 2 a.m. and
no, okay. I wake up early. I was like, you wake up early.
Well, it's, and that's why I always preface it when I tell people that I'm a freak. And it really came about because back before I was a lawyer, before law school, I was a teacher. And I found that I really didn't have the energy to lesson plan. But if I woke up very early, I would have no choice but to be super efficient with getting things done. And it just has kind of stuck since then.
2 a.m. though? Wow. I wake up at 5 and I'm like, I'm beast, but 2 a.m. I mean, that's what time you go to sleep?
Oh, like 8. So I'm down and out very early.
I mean, that's grandpa level. I love it.
Oh yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Look, let me tell you something. I used to work on Bourbon Street for like 8 years. Mm-hmm. So I've done the partying. I've partied into the ground. I buried the party, revived it, put it down again. So I'm cool with like just going to bed early and doing the domesticated thing. You know what? I'm reading an amazing book right now, Ethan and Parker. Ethan, our videographer. Mm-hmm. Deep Work. Have you read this book?
I have not, no.
Cal Newton, I believe the guy's name is. Mm-hmm. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, but the book is Deep Work. And it really is about how are we creating like moments in our schedule where we can focus on deep work, right. Like no distractions, no TV, email, text, games, notifications, social media. Like, dude, just the list of distractions goes on. And it talks about the residual effects of being pulled out of a focused session. So if we're working on something, say it's it could be like a book. Maybe we're writing a paper, and then like we get pulled off. Well, the problem is we have the residual effects of still focused on the book, so we can't really give this new thing that energy. And when they talk about the multitasking, like you can multitask on shallow things all day. You can do that, right? But like if you want deep, like connected and stuff that's like going to move you forward in a big way, like really move the needle forward, you've got to have that deep work. And so this book has just been, transforming my entire mindset where I'm all like, how can I disconnect,
Waking up at 2 a.m.
And waking up at 2 a.m. I mean, that's like
solution.
Who's up at 2?
No,
nobody's going, or they're going to sleep at 2.
Right.
But that's amazing. So how much, to your point, how has, and you still doing 2 a.m.?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of works out perfectly for me. So most of what I do in my day-to-day is help to review draft contracts. So it's something that I've done this hundreds of times, so it gets a little boring after a while. And I really do need to sit down and just focus and knock it out. Otherwise, it's going to take me 5 times as long. And plus, I'm working from home, and so I get to spend a lot more time with my son. And the advantage of waking up early is normally around noon, unless I have a call or something, I'm kind of wrapping up my day. So I can then spend the afternoon with my son, and it just all works out perfectly for me. But of course, you got to be the freak who is able to wake up that early, I guess, and go to sleep early.
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, look, especially doing contracts, which, God bless you.
Yeah.
I mean, what? I mean, when I see that much, I mean, I love to read books, but it's like engaging stuff. Like
Right.
you're creating contracts. Mm-hmm. Is there a template that you work from, and then you like based on the different clients that you have, you can restructure it, or are you having to start from scratch every single time?
So you definitely don't have to start from scratch every single time. Especially, I have a pretty niche focus in information technology. I do some entertainment, things related to intellectual property. And so there's a lot of constants there, a lot of kind of the basic things. The real customization comes in and understanding what the client's particular goals are, what their bargaining power might be in whatever industry they're in and what they're trying to get, and adapting the contract to that. But that kind of work is still, as interesting as that is, it can be monotonous over time. And so the way I try to at least make it a little bit more interesting is correct a lot of the bad drafting styles that you typically see in contracts from attorneys. Most contracts that you read, they're either of the quality of the LegalZooms of the world, where you don't know who wrote this, how qualified they were, where they pulled this thing from, or it's a complete opposite spectrum where you have lawyers writing contracts for lawyers, full of legalese, full of archaic things that aren't really relevant anymore. And it is a challenge to simplify without losing substance. But that's something that I try to do, because I find that it's just a lot easier. It's a lot easier to negotiate. It's a lot easier whenever you're trying to communicate to the other side kind of why something might be important. Whenever you get trapped up in all these legal terms, it really just makes your whole life more difficult. But some people like it because, frankly, it makes them feel important to be able to navigate some complex document, even though it doesn't necessarily need to be as complex.
Are you consulting with these companies as well? Is that part of the service?
Yes. So it's kind of I'm brought in typically with most of my clients. I come in either on the customer side or the vendor side. So for customers, typically larger companies who have a lot of information technology related contracts, their software, those types of things. And I come in and I try to help to streamline that process. And the focus really is how do we get them the tools that they need while managing risk, and also do it in an efficient way, because reviewing contracts can eat up a whole lot of resources in a company. On the vendor side, it's kind of different. It's more of how do we make a contract, one, clarifying expectations with the customer so they know what they're getting, two, make sure you're protected, especially your intellectual property, your assets are protected, and then three, make the process as easy as possible so you don't lose the sale. So that's generally what I do. It's a little bit of consulting, and I also do some training and things like that. But I like to think of it as I just help people get deals done. That's kind of my approach.
Very cool. Here's a question for you, because obviously you're in technology space. AI is running rampant. I mean, it's just going to another level. I mean, at what point do you see, I guess, the law getting involved in sort of AI and putting, I guess, things in place to like protect us, and how, or are you seeing anything now? Is there anything now that's sort of protecting us legally?
Well, so like a lot of things in law, there's a lot of talk right now. But I think realistically, just basing this off of other trends like data privacy, chances are it's going to take really 5 years at least before we really start seeing any kind of real regulation come about, my hunch is the first things we're going to see are going to be about tax, because there's going to be a lot of transition from human labor to machines, and so I'm sure the first thing that government's going to look to is how do we make sure we got the revenue coming in. Otherwise, I think it's early on, and people are still going to figure out, how do I adapt to this new technology? How do I augment what I do and continue to make myself relevant to potential clients? And I don't think that lawyers are going away by any stretch of the imagination, because at the end of the day, you want a human to be accountable for the work product.
Sure.
And so that's eventually what the lawyer is going to do. The lawyer is going to manage these resources, and AI is going to take away a lot of the bread and butter from a lot of lawyers. There's no doubt about that. But the question is, are the lawyers going to be able to step up and say, okay, what is my value add now? How do I adjust what I'm bringing to the table? I think what we're going to find is it's going to make life a lot better, because they're not going to have to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning slugging through a contract. Instead, they can utilize some kind of AI tool to summarize the issues, direct their attention and focus on what's really important.
Let me tell you something. Today, Ethan, we wrote, I think, six commercials using ChatGPT. 6. That took us 10 minutes. I mean, just, this is what we want. This is how we want it. Boop. It's done. And then we tweak it. Done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and Ethan knows, I've been having sort of this midlife existential crisis with this whole AI thing. Because I'm a writer, you know what I mean? I'm a creative, and, when you saw AI, you're like, oh, well, the jobs are going to be replaced of, more of the labor force and stuff. And it's never going to affect me. And now it's like, boom, here it is.
Right.
We don't need you, but it is forcing us to reevaluate how are we relevant to the client, right? And what is it that, how do we leverage this amazing tool? Because now that we don't have to spend hours writing scripts all day, we have an amazing tool that can spit it out quick, and then we tweak it, and then boom, it's a great, it does the heavy lifting.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It gives you can look at it as, oh, this is going to take something away, or this is going to free me up to do something else. And especially with what you do in the creative space, it's a huge opportunity, because now you don't have to spend all the extra time and mental energy on some of the nitpicky details, or just the act of revising language, where you can focus on the big picture creative and let all that minutia get done by the machine, and that's how you compete, I think. And I think people are still figuring out what this whole AI thing is. But the best explanation I've heard is, whereas traditional coding and computing takes rules and creates data, AI takes data and creates rules. And what that means is it allows us to take something that's seemingly very complex and simplify it. And the ones who learn to master that they're going to be the next wave of successful entrepreneurs and businesses that are coming about. And 100 years from now, they'll be talking about some other new technology that is going to be disrupting that. And that's just the way
true.
it works.
It is 100 years ago, like people were, getting electricity in their homes,
right?
And things like that. So that's, I mean, you think about that in terms of like, okay, what, let me not think of myself as so important as to think that, this is going to be so disruptive that it's going to change our lives, and it should. We should adapt and change with it, and not be necessarily afraid of it. Although I do. Damn, the technology these days, feeling like an old man,
Well, and I think it's scary, because it's something new, it's
100%.
something to adapt to. But I think we have to recognize, especially in this country, that we have allowed work to define us to the point where it's very unhealthy. And this is just another tool that's going to be at our disposal to say, hey, I can get done my economic function and create my value so that I can live the life I want to live and still have all this extra time to actually truly live.
Truly live, yeah. And be a human being and a family person and really engage. I got to tell you, which is why I love doing the podcast, because this connection, you know, and like really learning about somebody and asking questions and being, you know, and being involved, like that stuff I do love. I don't necessarily love to like write commercial scripts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that's because this is all life really is these moments like this. And when we're sitting there and we're in front of a computer screen and we're agonizing over this bill or that deadline or this client, we're really abstracting away from the moment. And we're creating our own anxiety. And the more we can get away from that, the easier and the better life will be, the less agitated people will be, you know, and I think things are just going to overall get better after that initial disruption. Of course, there's going to be a shakeup. It's going to cause some suffering and hardship. But eventually, I think that we've seen time and again, technology eventually breeds new
innovation.
opportunities.
Yeah. You seem to be a pretty level-headed, calm guy.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Yeah. What do you? How do you stay? You know, how do you stay so even keel and calm? Is it because you get to work from home?
I think that's a big part of it. I think my general approach is to constantly try to recognize when my ego is getting a little out of control. And that can come in different forms. For much of my life and my professional career, I did not do that. I found that my ambition was a good tool that I could use to get, you know, some kind of nominal success. And I kind of bought into that. And that that ended up being a really bad situation, and it, you know, caused a depression spiral for me. And it wasn't until I stepped back away from those things and started to let go of some of these aspects of who I thought I was that I started to see things a little clearer. And
so you were really focused on the ambition and pushing and, you know, what the end result was? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for me, and, you know, everybody has their Katrina story, but for me, for Katrina, I was in high school, and I'll never forget my grandparents lived in St. Bernard Parish, and going down there and seeing the look on my grandparents' face and the hopelessness. And I think that triggered in me this desire I have to control my environment. And that might mean doing well in school, it might mean getting a good job, making money. And it took me a long time, that was beneficial for where I am now. But it took me a long time to realize that at some point you have to let go of that, or you're going to be stuck in the misery of constantly trying to fill this infinite expectation that you have.
That never gets accomplished.
No, you can't get to infinity by counting.
Right.
And people try to count, they try to collect their accolades, they try to get this accomplishment, get this recognition, and they don't realize that you're going the wrong way.
Yeah.
In terms of having a joyful life.
Are you saying that once you let go, you've reached infinity? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think that there's two journeys you have to make. The first journey is this journey towards being really competent and really disciplined and good at something. But when you get there, and I think lawyers are a great example. There's a lot of lawyers who are there, but they're afraid to come back. They're afraid to then say, okay, maybe all of these things I've been working towards aren't really that important. Maybe it's not really that important that I am some top lawyer on some list somewhere, and whatever joy I think that's bringing me is being completely swallowed by the misery that is causing me to get there. And so I think once you reach that level, that competence, that leadership, that discipline, then you have to turn around and start gaining a little bit more humility. And I think you have to have that first journey to have the second, but without the second, you're going to have the most miserable life of anybody, because you're just constantly, you're up there at the top of what people see as the mountain, but all you can do is keep looking up to the peak that you'll never reach.
Oof. Look at that. That's deep. That's deep. I love it. No, you're right, though. I was always, especially in my 20s, so results oriented, like peak, like reaching the peak oriented, you know, and the ambition that, yeah, it becomes so cloudy that you just, you know, you're in the thick of it and you're just like, what is the purpose of this? Right? Like, is this making me happy? It's not necessarily making me happy. You know, it's the journey is what should be. It's the point, right? Like, it is. There's a book I read because a friend of mine passed away years back, but was introduced to me called Live a Thousand Years by Giovanni Rivera. Have you read it?
I have not. No.
It's fantastic. It's this guy who's a business guy in New York, and he's on the go. He's on the go. He's on the go. And he bumps into this old man, and the old man's like, you'll be back. And he's like, what? All right. He's heading to his meeting, and he goes into this diner or restaurant, and everybody's frozen in time, except for him. And all he can hear is this clock. Ding, ding, ding. And he's like, what the hell's going on, right? So he follows the clock, and he bumps into the old man that he had bumped into. And the old man's like, I'm Father Time. You know, I'm here to teach you some lessons. Kind of like a Scrooge, right. Christmas Carol style, where he takes him through the 12 chimes of, you know, getting each hour back as he learns a new lesson about, you know, carrying baggage and all of that, you know, all of that different stuff. But he's like, he takes him to his grandfather's gravesite. And he said, you know, what do you notice, you know, that are on the numbers? He's like, oh, you notice the birth date and the date he died, right? And then he's like, and then the dash. He's like, well, it's about the dash, right? Obviously. It's all about the little dash in there. That is the life, you know? And he's like, your grandfather lived 1,000 years. And he's like, what are you saying? What are you talking about, right? And he's like, well, the way he lived his life and the things that he focused on created that depth in life that became, you know, as if he lived 1,000 years, you know? So it's a really good book. But to your point, I think that that 2 journey process, you don't know what you don't know until you live through it, you know?
And it's kind of, it's almost like a sick joke, because so dealing with contracts every day, you come to realize that language has a funny way of making people think that they understand something when they probably don't, or at the very least, the communication isn't 100%. So, you know, you could say a word. The biggest one recently is people are all talking about data ownership. Well, under the law, there really isn't there's no concept of data ownership. That's not really a thing. But by saying it, people think that they understand. It's the same thing with others. I mean, it's Alexander the Great, okay? His name has lived on, but who is he? I mean, to most people who even know who he is or can reference him, it is just some vague notion of somebody who lived a long time ago and conquered places. That's not who that person was. Same with us. We think that we want to cling and build this memory that's going to last forever, but the memory of ourselves and even the people closest to us isn't who we are. And there's always going to be that gap. And I think that part of the challenge is to let go of those desires, let go of that concern of being a memory, of sticking around forever, you know, being quote unquote immortal in the eyes of people.
Yeah. And that's ego, right? Like, I mean, that's the ego really driving.
Yeah.
That's in the driver's seat.
Well, I think so. And the way I think of the ego is whatever side of us tells us we are special, we're unique, we're separate from everything else. And that can be useful. It can be a functional adaptation when you're competing or when you're trying to reach some goal to target your actions, but it's not real. And if we get too lost into that ego, then it takes over. And next thing you know, we don't know which way is up.
You speak the truth. So how do you keep your ego in check?
A lot of patience with myself. You know, you got to forgive yourself whenever, you know, you're going to get agitated every day. You're going to get upset. You're going to judge people. You're going to do these things. And the first part of forgiveness is acknowledgement. And so you just have to have this inner dialogue with yourself about, all right, you didn't live up to what you were hoping to live up to in that moment. That's okay. Let's try to do better. And it's just that constant process and not taking yourself too seriously. So like for those people who are watching, I have a silly mustache. Well, the silly mustache is there kind of for two reasons. The first reason is, one, to not take myself too seriously. It's just a reminder. I mean, how can somebody who's walking around with this, you know, take themselves too seriously? But the other thing is, it almost creates a weight for your interactions with people, because you're almost going into conversations and connections with people, and you know that they're going to be distracted by something. And so that is almost like a greater challenge that, okay, let's see if I can still connect. Let's see if I can still come across as somebody who's not a complete joke, and practice those things without worrying too much about my appearance and those types of concerns.
Very wise. You're a very wise person. You read a lot?
Well,
besides contracts?
audio, yeah. So
Audiobooks.
yeah, I'm a huge nerd. I just love to learn about different things and find connections and things. If there's anything besides really spending quality time with people that I love, it's that. I love to just test my brain and discover something new, and really have those moments where I say, oh shit, I thought I was so confident I understood something, and I was completely wrong.
Wow.
And
yeah.
I feel like the older I get, the more often that happens.
Yes.
And it's beautiful if you let it be. But a lot of people, they don't like to be confronted with surprises or things that they don't know, and they push back against that. And I really think that that's not the way to go if you want to grow and you want to just live a better life each day.
Hallelujah. You're a church-going man?
I am not, no. So I'm more, I transitioned from, I was kind of like a hardcore atheist as a younger person. And I think over time, I've studied more of kind of like Eastern philosophy, and I've come to appreciate the idea that the things that we think separate us are not, you know, as real as they seem. And I tend to look at other people and see, okay, that is in some deep sense, in the sense that I can't necessarily articulate me, but in some other circumstance. And so that's really where I find my spirituality, is in those types of connections, not so much in, looking to a higher power or something like that in a top-down kind of fashion.
Do you think with more time that people will have because of AI, do you think that we will get back to a point where, the thinking is going to be a thing? Or do you think that like more people are going to get more involved in their phone? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, obviously there's going to be a bunch of people that do that, and that are consumed by the technology, But what do you think that looks like here in the future?
Well, so now I'm going to put my former teacher hat on, and I'll say my biggest concern is we're not going to see the type of growth that I was fortunate enough to experience as much as we could have, because we're not giving enough people the tools to meet their basic survival. And so I look at the COVID-19 pandemic, and I see it as a huge tragedy, probably for reasons that most people don't think about. And that's, we had so many children whose school was their only refuge and who were already very far behind academically. And when I mean far behind, I mean 8th graders operating at a 2nd grade level in math and grammar and those types of things. And the fact that they were outside of that environment, and oftentimes in environments that were not as secure or didn't feel as protected and supportive as school can be for some of those kids, they have missed out more than generations in the past have. And they are going to be confronted with a world that demands a high skill set. And I think that's going to be our greatest challenge, is helping those people who didn't have those fundamental growth as a young person to adapt to an ever more complex society. And that's my biggest concern. So I would say that I don't necessarily think there's going to be some net positive or net benefit or net negative. I think that things are going to switch around, and you're going to see some people who are going to have those benefits, and then a whole lot of people who they can't. If you can't meet survival, you can't take that first journey. You can't
True.
develop yourself to then take the return journey. And I am hopeful that we'll see much more focus on that, especially the young people who really struggled through COVID. And I think that maybe turn things around, but I think it's something we really have to keep an eye on with all this.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. Along that sort of theme with living in the information age, right? And being like accessible, like having information at our fingertips, obviously. Like all of it. Whatever we want to know, right there and then. But we're not, are we as smart? Are we getting smarter? Are we getting dumber? Are we getting lazier? Is it, you know what I mean? Like there's two sides to every coin at every point, right? Like there's amazing stuff happening, and then there's stuff happening. And that just, I guess, the way the universe levels itself out, right? Like it's always going to be something amazing and always something but are we in a situation where, I'll ask this question first. Are we getting dumber, or are we getting smarter because information is so readily available?
Well, I guess the first thing we have to tackle is smarter or dumber relative to what, right? So relative to somebody 100 years ago and their ability to digest information and process it, probably we're getting smarter. But at the same time, the focus and the energy on the information, on the ability to go about adjusting your environment, whether just having the knowledge to do different things, different skills, that is taking away from a different kind of intelligence, which is the emotional intelligence that we have to have in order to navigate challenges. So someone may be very adept at figuring out how to solve problems, but they find themselves interacting with more and more problems, not because that's just the way life is, but because they're not focusing on that other side of intelligence that they need. So in some sense, in the greater strategy, we're getting dumber because we're putting all this effort and attention on something that, frankly, for the large part, humanity has solved. We've solved a lot of these problems, but we keep dwelling on them because we don't want to face these other problems, which are just dealing with life, just trying to...
Being okay with being bored.
Yeah, being in the moment, saying it's okay if some person across the country has slightly lesser view of me, if I don't make some deadline because I have my wife and my child right in front of me, and that is much more relevant, not only to me, but just my whole perspective on life. And so that's what I need to focus on. And so I think people look at all this information being at their fingertips as a power, but it's only a power if you know how to use it. And you're only going to know how to use it if you know how to balance it against something else.
How do you, does the, I guess the structure of learning change and teaching change, right? Like schools have to change now. I mean, they have to.
Yeah.
ChatGPT can print out a paper and you can tell it, do it at a 4th grade level, do it at a 7th grade level,
Right.
do it at 8th. I mean, it is extremely smart and it's only getting smarter,
Right.
you know?
And so, again, sometimes when you look into these things, you find that, okay, these are actually parts of larger trends that have been developing over time. And a great example, because I always have to, I'm one of those kind of people who, I don't mind just speaking up when somebody complains. I tend to not complain to connect. And a lot of times I hear parents, I've heard this for years, they complain about like Common Core math. Why do we have Common Core math? Oh, that's not what I learned. When I learned it, it was good enough. Now, well, the answer is because Common Core math is an attempt to move away from algorithms. Algorithms like the long division algorithm that we all learned in grade school is a completely useless tool with a calculator not because it doesn't get you the answer, but because to do the algorithm is not to really understand what division is. And so the idea behind Common Core math is we are going to teach kids what the process is, what is going on, not just the steps to solve a problem, but the approach. You know, it's like an engineering approach. And that's what we have to move more towards. It's not about memorizing this fact or this process or following directions. Now it's how do we take a child and motivate them to build the skills and the creativity to come up with something new.
Can you run for office?
Well, so there's a problem with the ego, and this isn't to, we need qualified people to run for office and to do things. But of all the things that there is to do, except for maybe being some super renowned, childhood celebrity, running for office is the most difficult way to keep your ego in check, because you have to make decisions. And if in the back of your mind, any part of that calculus is, I need to get reelected or I need to keep up my status, well, you've already lost, because now you're going to make decisions that are going to fuel your ego, and you're going to eventually move away from whatever good intentions you had to begin with. So I look at running for office for me as completely not in the cards for the lifestyle reasons, for the impact on my family. In some sense, of course, like everybody, you feel a little bit guilty because you're like, well, if I could help, why wouldn't I? But then you just got to get over that and just go live your life.
Dude, what an amazing just brain. I really enjoyed having you on the podcast, man. It's really good. Really good stuff, man. I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your time and just your perspective on things. It's just another reason why I love doing this, man, because you can just listening to people and just really just connecting. Because right here, I have to just be off of everything and just focus, And so I'm getting some mind shifting, stuff here, which is amazing. You know what I mean? I was really, really happy you came on. Look in here and tell everybody where they can find you.
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Parker Smith or CoreServe Legal. That's my firm. You can also, I have a website at www.coreservelegal.com. You can find me there, and feel free to reach out. You ever need help with contracts or just want to talk about life? Yeah.
Parker Smith, everybody. That was awesome. Super, super, super happy you were here, man. All right, that was Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching, always. And you can catch us anywhere where you can find us podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google, and brought to you by LeDuc Entertainment for all of your social media marketing needs, digital marketing videos. We got you, and we'll see y'all on the next one.